Next, we're going to look at type 3 problems that are a little different because they still give you one rate, but it's going to seem like it's giving you extra information, and the reason is because it really is fragmented. The information is cut in pieces. So for example, Superman flies 500 miles per hour, so that's the same rate that we had in the very first problem, for 2 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon. How far does he travel? So the first thing I'm thinking here is I only see one rate, which is 500 miles per hour, but I see two pieces of additional information. And the reason is because if he goes 2 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon, his rate stayed the same the whole time of 500 miles per hour. So I really want to know, how far does he go after 5 hours? Because that's how many hours he flew in total. So then I write, again, just one proportion since there's one rate of 500 miles per 1 hour. I want to know how many miles will he go in 5 hours, because in total he flew 5 hours. After I've written the proportion, I cross multiply and divide. I have 500 times 5 equals 1 times x. 500 times 5 is 2,500 equals 1 times x. I don't really need to divide by the coefficient, but I could. And if I divide by 1, my coefficients cancel, and x equals 2,500. And so if he flies 500 miles per hour, after 5 hours, he's going to fly 2,500 miles. So the reason I said this has fragmented information is because you saw that there was some information here, some information here. We just had to add them together before we still wrote just one proportion. I'd like you to stop the video here and now you try solving this type 3 problem. Press play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, you've tried this problem, so now it's time to check. The Punisher drives 12 miles per hour. That's the one rate of the problem. If he rides for 3 hours in the morning and 7 hours in the afternoon, how many miles will he ride in total? So you should see if it's 3 hours in the morning, 7 hours in the afternoon, he rode a total of 10 hours. So we need to figure out, if he goes 12 miles per hour, how far does he go after 10 hours? Your proportion should have been, right up here, 12 miles per 1 hour equals x miles for 10 hours. You might be able to do this in your head just by multiplying 10 by 10, or you can still solve this proportion like we'd always do, which is cross multiplying and dividing. So 1x equals 12 times 10, and that meant that x equaled 120, and that should have been your solution. In total, the Punisher is going 120 miles that day. I hope you got that right. We have just one last type of problem to look at, and that's a type 4 problem. These problems may be the trickiest because they give you two rates, which means in order to solve them, you're going to have to use two proportions. And really, you could use this kind of method for any number of rates. So if there were three rates, using 3 proportions, 4 rates, 4 proportions, and so on. So I'm going to start looking at G. Superman flies 500 miles per hour. So I see my first rate for 2 hours in the morning. And 300 miles per hour. So miles per hour, there's a second rate for 4 hours. How far does he travel? Since I see 2 different rates, I need to use different proportions for each rate. So my first proportion will use my first rate, which is 500 miles per 1 hour. And my second proportion will have to use the other rate, which is 300 miles per hour. Then I'll just complete it with the information that goes along with it. 500 miles per hour for 2 hours. We want to figure out how many miles he goes in that part of the day. 300 miles per hour for 4 hours. We want to know, I'll say y miles. We want to know how many miles he goes for that part of the day. So we have two proportions to solve this problem, and then we'll combine the information afterwards. Combining, or solving, you have 500 times 2h. So that's 500 times 2 equals 1 times x, 1 times x. And that really means 1,000 equals x. In that part of the day, he goes 1,000 miles. Second, solving here, 300 times 4, 300 times 4 equals 1 times y, 1 times y. And that really means he goes 1,200 miles in that part of the day. So in total, when I combine them, he's gone, if I add those two things together, 2,200 miles in total. And that's my solution. Okay, I'd like you to stop here. Please try H about the Silver Surfer. Press play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, you've tried, so now it's time to check your answer. First, identifying the information, the Silver Surfer flies 300 miles per hour. That's your first rate for 2 hours. And 500 miles per hour, that's your second rate for 3 hours. How far does he travel in total? So your proportion should have been the first one, 30 miles per 1 hour equals x miles for 2 hours. And 50 miles per hour equals, let's say, y miles for 3 hours. So those are the two proportions you should have had. Now you cross multiply and divide. 30 times 2, that's just 60, equals 1 times x, that's just x. In the first part of the day, he goes 60 miles. 550 times 3, that's really 150, equals 1 times y, that's really y. In the second part of the day, he goes 150 miles. And in total, that means he goes 210 miles that day. And that would have been the solution. Hope you got that right. You've had several guided practice opportunities at each slide. Now it's time for independent practice. Please complete these 5 problems. After you submitted your answers for these 5, you should be ready to retake objective assessment 2C.1-5. Again, this has been a pretty long video because it's covering the entire unit in one video. There's a lot of skills here. Good luck. Okay, you've tried H, now it's time to check your answer. First is to identify the information. The Silver Surfer flies 30 miles per hour. That's your first rate for 2 hours. And then 50 miles per hour for 3 hours. That's your second rate. How far does he travel in total? You should have written 2 proportions. The first proportion with 30 miles per hour. The second rate with 50 miles per hour. And then you use the additional information. So 30 miles per hour for 2 hours, you'll solve that. 50 miles per hour for 3 hours, we'll solve that. And we'll say we're looking for how many miles does he go in that part of the day, and how many miles does he go in that part of the day. So those are the two proportions you should have had. Then you cross multiply. 30 times 2 is really 60. 1 times x is really x. So he goes 60 miles in that part of the day. 50 times 3 is 150 equals 1 times y. That's really just y. And so he goes 150 miles in that part of the day. You add them together to find the total, which means in total he goes 210 miles for the whole day. And that should have been your solution. I hope you got that answer. Now it's time for independent practice. Here are your 5 independent practice problems. If you complete these and earn your blue ribbon, you should be ready to retake objective assessment 2C.1-5. Good.